Hello, and welcome to Fiduciary Pension Partners Fiduciary Fitness Committee Training Module number 5, Understanding Fees and Expenses. Hi, my name's Steve Puckett, Managing Partner with Fiduciary Pension Partners, and I will be walking you through this committee training module about fees and expenses. Again, Fiduciary Pension Partners, we are your independent pension consulting firm handling all of your retirement plans needs from outsourced CIO, investment fiduciary analysis, plan design analysis, committee training, employee education, employee consulting, anything you need, we are here to help. Again, in this training module, we'll cover fees and expenses. And to start with, very first understanding is a plan fiduciary must act solely in the interest of plan participants, beneficiaries, and alternative payees to ensure that only reasonable expenses are paid by the plan. This module describes what type of plan fees are and best practices for fiduciaries and how they can implement to meet their fiduciary duty to ensure that plan fees are reasonable. Again, most importantly, it does not say that you need to have the cheapest. You just need to know what your fees are that you're paying and whether they're customary and reasonable. So first and foremost, the types of plan fees that you need to look for. Plan administrative fees. Those are fees for the operations of the plan. That would be record keeping, technology, compliance services, communication services, accounting, legal, trustee, sending out notices, statements, record keeping. Those are plan administrative fees. Investment fees are typically related to the management of the plan assets and the investing of those plan assets. And they are generally assessed as a percentage of plan assets. And then thirdly, you have participant elective services. And these may be charged specifically to that participant that decides to use an elective service, i.e. getting a new loan, getting a distribution, or rolling over money. And the methods for paying fees, billed fees are typically assessed either directly to the participant's accounts or invoiced to the plan. Asset-based fees are either are fees that are typically deducted from the participant's accounts or from the trust. And revenue sharing is monies that come from the investment management that can be used to offset other types of fees. So again, when you look at kind of the components of fees, investment management fees, and those fees to manage a mutual fund, a collective investment trust, or a stable value or general account, there's costs of managing that money, and that would be investment fees. Administrative fees and professional fees, those either to handle record keeping, administration, plan documents. Again, they can either be billed or they can be deducted from the plan. But ultimately, you have a total plan cost made up out of these three types of plan fees. So again, when we talk about investment management, it's very important to understand expense ratio and revenue sharing. So a mutual fund has a expense ratio. And in that expense ratio covers all of the costs of managing that money. And that may be trading costs, that may be costs of sending out prospectuses, maybe costs of actually sending out statements, overseeing that any software or technology that is needed is included in that revenue sharing or included in that expense ratio. Now, what also could be included in that expense ratio are other fees that can be used to pay for other services. So first and foremost, a 12B1 fee is typically a distribution fee that is paid out of plan assets that usually pay commissions or marketing expenses to brokers and broker dealers. Sub-TA and shareholder services fees are administrative fees shared by the mutual fund that go to pay the record keeper to handle participant record keeping services. So those services that the mutual fund would normally have to do if they record kept the assets, but because it's in a 401k plan and being record kept on a platform, then the mutual fund can share those with that record keeping plan provider. 28-E fees are charged by brokerage firms for extra commission that can be used to pay for additional services, typically the cost of research, etc. And then wrap fees are fees in addition to the expense ratio that are put on top of the investment fees that are used to pay for other services. And again, most importantly, you need to know what is the gross expense ratio and what's the net expense ratio if any of the investment options do offer these various shareholder servicing fees. And just to give you an example of how they work, is most registered mutual funds have multiple share classes. Most collective investment trusts have multiple share classes. And again, as a retirement plan, you are going to need to know which investment class you can purchase. Many investment classes have a minimum of $1 million, $10 million, or $100 million. Some are retail in nature, some are institutional in nature, some are only for retirement and pension plans, qualified plans. So again, you need to know what share classes are available when you are looking at them. But again, ultimately, the lower expense ratio share classes will have less other administrative expenses in the overall expense ratio. And so they have less money to pay the service provider or the platform. And share class considerations obviously are based on, do you have the minimum amount of monies to access that share class? Again, there may be multiple share classes that are offered that you could take advantage of. And so you need to understand that, gross versus net. And again, we have 3 different share classes here: R share 3, R share 4, and R share 6. And you can see when we look at the expense ratio, that is the total expense, the R3 is 1.14% of assets. One is 0.85% of assets, and one is 0.50. Again, in there is also revenue sharing. So revenue sharing covers that 12B1 shareholder services. The R3 pays 65 basis points of expense back to the platform. The R4 is paying 35 basis points back to the platform. And the R6 is paying none of the record-keeping expenses of the 401k plan. But when you look at, obviously, the net versus gross, the expense ratio, obviously, the lower is the better. Again, if you need to pay for plan expenses, you're going to want to look at potentially funds that have revenue sharing. But remember, your rate of return will be net of all of your expenses. So the lower expense fund will tend to have a higher rate of return. And it will traditionally be the difference between that expense ratio. So the 64 basis points between the R3 and the R6 would show up in the yearly rate of return. So if we look at the 5-year rate of return of 13.85 versus 13.17, that difference is approximately 68 basis points, very similar to the difference between the expense ratio. So you need to know, again, if there's any minimum dollar thresholds that you need to use, or if your platform only allows, a particular share class. Again, you're going to want to know what that is. Again, financial professional fees can be paid as a flat dollar, can be asset-based, or can be both. Many organizations use a minimum of $3,000 a year, or 50 basis points, etc. Financial professional fees can be paid out of plan assets, can be either paid out of 12B1s, can be paid as a wrap charge or an asset-based charge, and also can be paid out of a ERISA budget. So again, those revenue sharing monies tend to go into an ERISA budget, And that's where you could pay for your plan expenses, like your financial professional, your auditor, or any of those plan expenses. Again, there are two fee disclosure requirements. The 408B2, so that is the ERISA section 408B2, covers service providers to disclose fees to plans in writing. This disclosure must be provided in advance of the date that the plan is entering into the agreement, must disclose any type of direct or indirect compensation. Again, direct and indirect compensation includes anything of monetary value. Disclosure must contain sufficient information to allow the plan sponsor to make reasonable compensation. And if a service provider is receiving indirect compensation, it must disclose that as well. The 404A5 is the participant fee disclosure. So the 408B2 goes to the plan sponsor. And again, that discloses all of the service provider financial professionals' fees. The 404A5 is the disclosure that goes to the participants. In that disclosure, you need an explanation of all administrative fees, any fees that are charged against participants' accounts, and any individual elected fees that the participant could pay for elective services. That would be like loans, hardships, or qualified domestic relation orders. And again, investment fees must have the description of those fees and include a total annual operating expense as a percentage of assets. So you need to say in that participant fee disclosure that basically it would be X dollars based on $1,000 invested. The disclosure does not need to be provided quarterly as long as nothing changes, and fees are required to be disclosed on Form 5500, either in Schedule A or on Schedule C. And when we're talking about fees, again, best practices, again, review your 408B2 for your plan sponsor, and also review your 404A5 participant fee disclosure. Make sure you understand. Again, when you are hiring a service provider, make sure you benchmark, record keeping, benchmark third-party administrator services, benchmark your investment advisor. Again, understand your investment advisor, whether they are acting in a broker-dealer faculty, or whether they're acting as a 321 co-fiduciary, or whether they are acting as a 338 full discretionary fiduciary. Again, understand the level of services. Again, remember from fees and expenses, it's not that you need to have the cheapest, it's just that you need to know that they're reasonable and customary. So you do need to benchmark your services. Again, evaluate the services that may have optional services and optional ideas. Determine what services are covered under what fees, and then monitor your fees. Typically every year when you have the fee disclosure documents, review them with your executives, review them with your professional, your financial consultants, and make sure they are customary and reasonable. Again, action steps. Number one, establish and follow a prudent process for understanding and documenting your fees. So again, review that 408B2 disclosure, review that 404A5 disclosure, and benchmark your fees. Accept only full and transparent fee disclosures. Conduct regular benchmarking. Again, fees tend to not change over time, but we do recommend benchmarking your fees typically once every 2 or 3 years. And again, beware of anyone who says they can do it for free, because there is no such thing as free. In the 401k world, free was a term that was used in the 1990s. But as you know, there's no service that is free. If anyone offers you a free service, again, make sure you understand that that does not happen, and they are making money somewhere else or somehow somewhere else. And again, remember, you don't have to have the lowest fees. You just need to know that they're customary and reasonable. And again, If you do want to hire a independent financial consultant to strictly benchmark your fees, that is something that Fiduciary Pension Partners does as well. Again, thank you very much for your time. Again, that is the end of our fiduciary fitness program, Understanding Fees and Expenses. Thank you very much and have a great day.